The Shrek we grew up watching almost never existed, and I mean that literally. The version of Shrek that became one of the most memed franchises in internet history almost never made it to screen because before Mike Myers ever opened his mouth with that Scottish accent, there were two completely different versions of this film that got scrapped, and one of them was buried with the man who recorded it. I stumbled upon this story and couldn't stop reading because the behind the scenes of Shrek is wilder than anything that happens in the actual movie. We're talking about a dead comedian, a Canadian accent nobody wanted, a Scottish accent nobody expected, and the fact that the studio was literally using the film as a punishment for their worst employees. Let's start from the very beginning. When DreamWorks first started developing Shrek in the mid-1990s, nobody wanted to work on it. This was the studio also producing The Prince of Egypt, a traditionally animated biblical epic with an all-star cast. That was the project everyone wanted to be on. Val Kilmer, Ralph Fiennes, Michelle Pfeiffer, Patrick Stewart felt like the future of DreamWorks animation. I mean, I'd want to be on it too if I was an actor, but Shrek felt like the opposite. It was a computer-animated film about an irritating ogre who lived in a swamp and opened his movie by farting in a pond. In 1996, outside of Pixar, nobody had successfully released a full-length computer-animated feature film. Traditional animators considered CG animation beneath them, and the subject matter itself was deliberately disgusting. Based on a picture book by William Steig, the original Shrek character was meant to be the most revolting creature in the world. He married the second most revolting creature, and they had revolting children. Nobody wanted to animate that. So, DreamWorks made a decision that is honestly one of the darkest and funniest things I've ever learned about a major studio. If you messed up on The Prince of Egypt, if your work was substandard, if you caused problems, you got demoted. And being demoted meant only one thing. You got sent to work on Shrek. Animators called it the Gulag. The film that would eventually gross over $3.5 billion across its franchise was a punishment. Now, you have to pay close attention here. While all this was happening at DreamWorks, a cast was being assembled, and the person they chose to voice Shrek was Chris Farley, Saturday Night Live legend, one of the most beloved comedians of his generation. If you're too young to know who Chris Farley was, I'll help you out. He was the kind of comedian who made you feel something beyond just laughing. Physically enormous, and he used every inch of that in his performances, diving through tables, injuring himself mid-sketch without breaking character. But here's the thing about Farley that everyone who knew him kept coming back to. Underneath all the chaos, and the volume, and the physical destruction, there was a genuinely sweet person who desperately wanted to make people happy. His co-stars talked about him the way people talk about Robin Williams, a performer whose energy in a room was unlike anything else, but whose private self was softer and more uncertain than the stage version. He never quite believed how loved he actually was. And that's why casting him as Shrek made so much sense. A character who wanted to be accepted by a world that had already decided what he was. Farley didn't even have to act. This makes complete sense when you understand what the original version of Shrek was supposed to be. The script at that point was built around a different kind of character. Farley's Shrek was younger, more earnest, a gentle giant who desperately wanted to be a knight and prove himself to a world that had already written him off because of how he looked. He was vulnerable and hopeful in a way that matched Farley's own screen energy perfectly. The writers based the dynamic between Shrek and Donkey specifically on Farley's real-life relationship with David Spade and Tommy Boy. That specific chemistry of big, lovable mess of a person being dragged through chaos by someone faster and more sarcastic than him. And Chris Farley recorded nearly all of it. Between 85 and 90% of his dialogue was in the can. Then, in December 1997, he died. Drug overdose at 33 years old. When I eventually found out, I was just like, how did I not know about this? Shrek came out in 2001. I watched it as a kid. I had no idea that underneath that Scottish accent and all those fairy tale jokes, there was a completely different movie, a completely different character built around a man who died before he could finish it. DreamWorks was left in an impossible position. Farley's brother, John, was offered the chance to come in and finish the remaining 5 days of recording. He said no. There was a talk of hiring a Farley impersonator to complete his lines. That idea was scrapped too. Director Andrew Adamson later said that the team spent a year with their heads against the wall trying to figure out what to do. And then someone suggested Mike Myers. Now, when Mike Myers came on board, he demanded the script be completely rewritten. He wanted a full new take on the character, and DreamWorks agreed because they had no choice, and because Myers was, well, Mike Myers. So Myers recorded the entire film, all of it, in his natural Canadian accent. A Canadian Shrek! That was almost the version that came out in cinemas. The whole film was done, animation was being built around the voice, production was moving forward, and then Myers watched a rough cut of the film and felt something was missing. He wanted the character to feel working class and gruff, but with a warmth underneath. He felt a Scottish accent could do that in a way his natural one couldn't. He also had a specific reason for the contrast. Lord Farquaad speaks with an upper-class English accent. Having Shrek speak Scottish created an instant class dynamic between the hero and the villain without a single word of explanation. The audience could feel it immediately. Why did it work? Well, here's what Myers had to say. He felt that Scottish carried a working-class weight that his natural voice couldn't produce. There's a long history in British culture of Scottish accents being associated with people who work with their hands, who live close to the land, who have no patience for pretension. Myers wanted Shrek to feel like someone who had earned his roughness through lived experience. Put that against the upper-class English villain energy that Farquaad carries, and you don't need anyone to explain the social dynamic between these two characters. You feel it the moment they're in the same scene. The working-class ogre versus the aristocratic tyrant. That's smart filmmaking hidden inside what most people just hear as a funny accent. Myers went to the studio and asked to redo everything. DreamWorks was not happy. 1/3 of the film had already been fully animated based on his Canadian performance. Jeffrey Katzenberg laid it out plainly. Changing the accent meant new mouth movements. Every scene with Shrek would need to be reworked. The price? Somewhere between $4 and $5 million. 10% of the entire film's budget. Myers offered to re-record all of his lines for free because he was that confident in the change. DreamWorks still had to pay for all the animation work, but they agreed to let him try. Now, if you're hyper, you might want to chill a bit because the next part made me so excited you can't even imagine. Myers went directly to Steven Spielberg. The Steven Spielberg. Spielberg was an uncredited executive producer on Shrek. Myers made his case for the Scottish accent, and Spielberg said give it a go. After Myers recorded the new version, Spielberg sent him a personal handwritten letter. The letter said, "You're so right, it's way better as Scottish. Thank you so much." Mike Myers has that letter framed. Think about what that means. Imagine receiving a personal thank you note from Steven Spielberg for trusting your own instincts. And Spielberg was right to send it because the Scottish accent changed everything about the character. Jeffrey Katzenberg later said it was absolutely the right call. The $4 million was well spent. Now, here's the question I kept sitting with after going through all of this. What would the Farley version have been? In 2015, a story reel from the original production was leaked online.
And Farquaad said he'd give me my own swamp in exchange for the princess. But now I'm gonna have what he wants.
You can hear Farley voicing Shrek in a scene alongside Eddie Murphy's donkey. Farley's Shrek is softer, and when I heard it out loud, I found it sweet and sad at the same time because you can hear him finding the character. There's a warmth to it that Myers' version doesn't quite have in the same way. Myers' Shrek copes with the world by shutting it out and being sarcastic about everything. Farley's Shrek seems like someone who genuinely wants to be included and keeps getting hurt when he isn't. Farley's version was motivated by a desire to be loved. Myers' version was motivated by a desire to be left alone. Those are two completely different emotional cores for the same character. What makes it even sadder is that Shrek might have been Farley's breakthrough into something more serious. He was known for physical comedy and chaos, but what you hear in that audio is something more delicate. He was hitting emotional notes that his film career had never asked him to hit before, and he never got to finish it. So here's where I land on all this. The film that became one of the most successful animated franchises in history started as a punishment project. The studio assigned their worst-performing animators to it. Nobody wanted to be there. The original voice actor died before he could finish it. the replacement recorded the whole thing, then decided it was wrong and started over. The studio spent millions fixing animation that had already been finished, and what came out the other side was Shrek. And the Prince of Egypt comparison gets funnier the more you think about it. The film that had a lot of stars, including Val Kilmer, Ralph Fiennes, and Michelle Pfeiffer, DreamWorks threw everything they had at it. It made $218 million and then largely faded from conversation. Shrek had the rejected animators, a dead man's unfinished recording, a replacement who changed his accent halfway through, and a fart joke in the first 60 seconds. It made $484 million, won the first ever Academy Award for Best Animated Feature, and is still being quoted on the internet 20 years later. Sometimes the thing nobody believes in is the thing that changes everything, and somewhere in DreamWorks' vaults, there's still a mostly completed version of Shrek, voiced by a man who never got to see it finished. We'll probably never officially see it, but we know it exists. The Shrek you know almost wasn't, and the Shrek that almost was is locked in a vault somewhere and probably will stay there. Drop your take in the comments. Do you think Farley's version would have been better, or did the chaos of production accidentally create something that couldn't have been planned? And if you want more of this kind of behind-the-scenes history, go watch our Coraline video right after this, because that story has the same energy. A deleted version of a film that would change everything you think you know about the movie.